The Honorable House has resumed its sitting. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? May I call on the mover to... May I call on the mover? I called 3 times. The normal rule is the speaker calls 3 times. And the member for South Sound can take a seat. I did catch after I'd called, and not until after I called did I catch the members. The member from Georgetown Central. But members, you're going to have to pay close attention. If you're going to play out the waiting game, you will lose your chance. But because we do have some new members, we give some leeway for that. The member for... I saw the member for Georgetown Central. I didn't see.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. See that we're gonna play the game.
The member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First say that I was expecting to at least hear some contributions from other members of government in respect to their position on what the government has presented by way of budget debate. But I see politics is in full swing in respect to this waiting game that the public may not be aware of, for persons to have the last say.
Then you should, then honorable member, you should get up when you're called upon by the speaker. There won't be any politics when I call on you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. And that line of statement wasn't directly at you, sir, but I'm not afraid to highlight the elephant in the room that we all play the game here. But I guess everybody's anticipating what I'm going to say. And the time now being 7 minutes past 7, I guess my time will be cut short. I don't know. But I was expecting to speak tomorrow, but I definitely don't want to lose my opportunity to speak. So I'll get started and I'll shoot from the hip. And I think we should start firstly with the heading of the Honorable Premier and leader of this quote-unquote unity government, the heading of the budget policy statement. And it starts with stability, empathy, and prosperity. And at first, Mr. Speaker, I was quite happy to see the word empathy in there, because I thought it was something that the past administration did not have in respect to what the people of the Cayman Islands were going through. But I found myself having to research again, just for clarity from my own mind, what exactly the meaning of empathy is. So just to check my brain, I said, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. So basically, this administration is saying they understand and they share the feelings of another. But Mr. Speaker, at this particular stage, having empathy throughout the campaign was good. But I think what this policy statement should say is stability, action, and prosperity. Because the people no longer want you to understand. They want you to understand and now do something about. And just for purposes of clarity, I think it's important that I define the word action and what it should be titled as. Because the word action means, and there's so many different meanings when I looked in my dictionary in so many different forms, but in this case, it means the fact or process of doing something typically to achieve an aim. That's what this policy statement should be labeled as, but I'm not going to get into the nuances of what the policy statement is labeled as. We want to get into what's in the policy statement, Mr. Speaker. I am saddened, I must say, that one of the top things that popped out to me that was not in this policy statement, which was a big campaign issue for a lot of us in this legislative assembly. And I took the liberty of getting the manifestos as many people who were elected in this house as I could in the short period of time that I recognized I would need them. But particularly the one for the progressives, because they hold the leadership position. And I bring up the fact that within the policy statement, within the budget statement, that there was no discussion, which my colleagues on this side has already highlighted, but I have to reiterate it because it's so important. There was no discussion about foreclosures in this country. So I said, well, was it in their manifesto? It wasn't. So obviously, Mr. Speaker, for the people of the Cayman Islands, it's no surprise that it's not a priority for this administration. Now, the question, Mr. Speaker, is going to come up whether it was a priority for the 3 members of the CDP and the 2 independent members of the current government, whether it's a priority for them. And I expect that they will speak for themselves, because it wasn't in the Progressives Manifesto and it wasn't in the statement that the Honorable Premier has delivered to this Honorable House. And the statement obviously outlines the plan by way of budget of what the government plans to address. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am very proud that we have the independent member from Prospect who was bold enough to stand up and show his ability to disagree with his own administration, at least on one point. Now, I'm not going to highlight the fact that he disagreed. What he has done is set a precedent to show that a person is capable of not necessarily agreeing with their own team, at least on that one issue. He obviously highlighted a lot of other things that he was in agreement with. So that means it's capable of happening. So I'm going to assume, Mr. Speaker, that the rest of the members of the current government, if they don't stand up and state their position on things they do not agree with, the assumption has to be made that anything that the Premier states in this Honorable House, they're in agreement with it if they don't stand up and say something about it. Because, respectfully, the independent member was bold enough to stand and say that I am independent, I support and work with the government, but in that one particular issue, and the issue that we're talking about, Mr. Speaker, was the port. And I give him much respect for that, because history has shown that when you do not agree with the current leader of the government, things don't go too well. And I refer to a former legislator, person very honorable to me, Mr. Winston Connolly. And he's given much...
Honorable member, look at the policy statement and on the budget speech. And none of that is in there, and it is not up for debate. I am sorry, regardless of what your backbench colleague may be telling you. There is nothing in the debate of those two aspects of the debate. So please stick to what is in front of you.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Are you writing on a point of order?
On a point of clarity, because Mr. Speaker,
There is no point of clarity. There's
yeah,
no
Mr.
room
Speaker,
for...
you made a statement.
Member, please. There is no point of clarification here. The member has been making a point. It's not in front of us. Nobody has referred to that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't talking about his point. That's not my business. You said, sir, that regardless of what his backbench colleagues has been telling him, I would respectfully ask that you name who those backbench colleagues are, because I ain't been telling them anything.
Maybe I don't see any backbench colleague. Maybe that I was thinking there was one. Honorable
well, it must
member,
be the
please
shadow
continue.
ministers
Honorable
then.
member for Georgetown Central, please continue your speech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do apologize if I've gone out of the scope of the debate. But unfortunately, because the scope of the debate is very ambiguous at this point, Mr. Speaker, because there seems to be no true parameters, because some members are allowed to go farther distances and some aren't. So I apologize if I have gone out of the scope, because it's not very clear, Mr. Speaker. Moving on, Mr. Speaker. I just want to highlight some of the areas in the budget policy statement that draws concern for me. And one would assume that if I haven't highlighted it as a concern, that I agree with it. One of the things that was a bit of an issue for me was the notion that the Honorable Premier, I'm assuming, supported by his colleagues, is this notion of a transshipment, or the potential of transshipment being done in Georgetown Harbor. That brings up a major concern for me. Now, I know that this administration, Mr. Speaker, has plans for the port. And though the Deputy Premier highlighted that he was going to give us the cost amount and never did, because he said in response to the Honorable Opposition Leader that he would give a number and never did, maybe the Premier in his response back can tell the country who is awaiting the idea of what this price of this port is going to be, because I know the port is a very big priority for this administration. Whether you agree with it or not, that's their position. But I am concerned that we're starting to get mixed messages now in respect to what the government plans to do in Georgetown Central. Because now we're hearing transshipment, and we're hearing cruise port, and we're hearing revitalization of Georgetown. Now, if we're going to beautify Georgetown Central, which is my constituency, I'm almost certain that nobody in Cayman wants to see a transshipment. If you have an idea of what a transshipment location looks like, it's a very large area, potentially acres, of containers upon containers upon containers upon containers, storage, waiting to move to another location. And it's not a very beautiful sight. So I think the government needs to clarify its position, particularly to my constituents in Georgetown Central, if that is the plan of this administration. And I should definitely refer to exactly what he said in respect to his speech. It says on page 19, Mr. Speaker, the Port Authority has also received considerable interest in shipping companies that not only want to bring their large ships here, but have indicated that Grand Cayman could serve as a transshipment port for perishable cargo out of Central America. The economic potential for Georgetown to serve as a transshipment port is certainly welcome and will be pursued. Words out of the Honorable Premier's mouth, who leads this administration. Now, unless he's speaking about somewhere else in Georgetown, that also needs to be delivered to the people of this country where exactly he's talking about. Because I can only assume, Mr. Speaker, that he's talking about Georgetown Central. And if he is talking about Georgetown Central, Mr. Speaker, he needs to come and speak to my people. Because we have agreed that potentially, depending on the cost, that a cruise port may be necessary for this country. But no time did he speak to the people of Georgetown Central about a transshipment in Georgetown Central. So please, Mr. Speaker, I ask the Honorable Premier and his administration to clarify that point. Moving on, Mr. Speaker. The Premier has used some very strong words in respect to nuclear options of price control. Mr. Speaker, I was rather surprised to hear the Premier say the word price control because his colleague, his former running mate, almost ate me alive in the campaign when I mistakenly used the word price control. I don't need to call his name. He's moved on and doing well, and I wish him well. But in the campaign, we used the word price control, and it was a tactic to scare the business community to say Kenneth Bryan wanted price control in his company and what it would do to the business community. But the Honorable Premier is going to get up in this House and potentially say he will use price control as a nuclear option. The part that is interesting to me, Mr. Speaker, is the part where he says this is pertaining to fuel because fuel is a necessary commodity. Mr. Speaker, food in my stomach is also a necessary commodity for me to live. So please do not pick and choose what things you are willing to say price control for, because you see, Mr. Speaker, price control for fuel is digestible to the voters of this country. They mightn't get too frustrated about that. But if he said price control for food, he know that he may not get a good response on that. So hence the reason, the one line to say this is in reference to fuel. But how can you tell my people that you're willing to use a nuclear option of price control only for fuel, but when we know that there's other persons out there who are taking advantage from a pricing perspective on other necessary goods that Caymanians need? Mr. Speaker, I'll refer to page 10 of the Honorable Premier's speech at paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, where he says, but Mr. Speaker, let me be clear that if there's cooperation does not continue to our satisfaction, and the government is of the view that the only way to properly protect consumers would be to institute price control, then it should be understood that we will do so. Words of the Honorable Premier of this administration. And then he goes on to say, Mr. Speaker, just as fuel is a necessity, so is affordable housing. So is he suggesting that anything that is a necessity for the people that he is willing to do price control, he needs to clarify that to the people of this country? Who knows? We might need it, but I know that the business community may not be too happy about that. But moving on, Mr. Speaker. The Premier also spoke about community policing, and I'm assuming that when we get down to Finance Committee, we'll be talking about the number of officers that they have highlighted that they will have in the communities, because up to now, I haven't seen a list of where these community officers will be placed. I think it's an important factor that I think all members of this House would want to know. Because I have heard previously, before I was elected to this honorable house, of the member for East End and the honorable opposition leader, member for North Side, talk about community officers in different wording many, many times on the radio, in Parliament, on TV. And they couldn't get it. I find it interesting that it's attractive now, after the crime has gotten to that level where that we need it. It's becoming attractive now that they're saying it. It wasn't attractive when the opposition leader or the member from East End was saying it. But again, Mr. Speaker, I'm learning very quickly that politics is in full swing. And like my colleague, the member for Newlands, highlighted earlier, you don't go like me. That's fine. Many of the members of the current administration weren't happy when I won, just as much as they weren't happy when he won. But the members of Georgetown Central constituency sent me here to make sure there is a reason why they chose me over Marco. Because there's always the questions about his qualifications over mine. But this seem delivery and holding to accountability is what they wanted. There's a reason why the outcome of this election was the way it was. Why no group of a party had the majority. Because they weren't singing the right songs. Now, some may say, well, we never got it done. When I say we, talking about the independents, that's another conversation for another day, maybe on another platform. But, Mr. Speaker, I am really concerned that what I heard, what I noted in respect to the government's plan with the money that they are receiving by way of revenues to government seems to be a lot of seam-all. And I cannot say to you, Mr. Speaker, that I am confident, because the thing about words on paper is they're free. Anybody can write something down. Anybody can say anything. And, Mr. Speaker, maybe this is a word of knowledge for myself. It's interesting to know why the debate is not after we've gone to Finance Committee, because the details that is necessary in respect to the spending amounts and all the money that the government is going to be spending on behalf of the people are in this book. And until I get the opportunity to question about the multi-millions of dollars that they're spending, where it's going, who it for, what department it exactly is in. I mean, now, of course, the budget is here and it says, but I must give credit to the Ministry of Finance, where their civil servants have given me a lot of assistance on trying to understand this. But even them have admitted there's a lot of details in here that I can't get the answers to. So I can't, even if I wanted to give much credit to this administration, I couldn't, because the details are not in this book. All it is a bunch of numbers. And the questions that I need to ask, I won't be able to ask them until Finance Committee. So, as a matter of fact, speaking of which, I think it's a good time for me to go to the planning estimates in respect to the work permit fees. And I know that my colleagues have highlighted the increase in work permit fees. And just for reference sake, for the listening and viewing audience, in 2016-17, when we had an 18-month budget, the government made $99.7 million in work permits. So if you did that in comparison to 1 year, you would have to divide that into 3 and you come out to about $66 million. So basically per year, about $66 million the government made on work permit fees. Now the projections for 2018, 1 year, has increased by $4 million. So they're now going to make $70 million in work permit fees. So the assumption is only could be made that they're going to increase the work permits. But I use that and then I refer back to another area of the planning estimates, which has to do with social welfare, which blows my mind. Because, Mr. Speaker, we always hear that when the economy is doing better, when there's more work permits, there's more Caymanian jobs. But for that same year that the work permits are increasing, in poor relief payments, where we know when people are having a hard time to go get poor relief, that their projections for that same year is increasing by almost 25%, from 950 people to 1,200. So that department is saying to this government, based on trends, that more and more Caymanians are coming for assistance for food, light, water, rent, childcare, whatever you think you can think about. They're coming to government for more help, and they need more money to help them. But yet the government sells to the people of this country that when we have more work permits, that more Caymanians get opportunities. That equation, I know scientists, Mr. Speaker, but that don't make sense to me. Mr. Speaker, now I want to turn to page, and by the way, just for reference, if anybody who is listening or watching by TV, they want to know where the transfer payments for poor relief is at, it's on page 288 of the planning estimates. Because I know the government is very proficient, particularly the Ministry of Finance, that this document is online. So I would suggest to the people of the country, if we truly want a full understanding of where the government is at and project where we're going, take a look at these figures, because some interesting things come up when you see numbers and how they go up and go down. I want to turn, Mr. Speaker, to another page on the planning and estimates chart sheet. On page 336. Now, I'm no economist. I have, at first when I went to UCCI before I got my degree, I actually wanted to do accounts. I did a certificate, 1 year certificate in accounting first, to try to get myself into an associate's degree. By the time I got to my associate's degree, I changed my mind to something else. So I do have the foundation of principles of accounting down. So I was looking through the cash flows. And based on page 336 in the planning estimates, the government is going to make a lot of money, and after they've paid for all their operating activities, they're going to be left over with $113 million. And try to keep it as simple as possible, because if I complicate it, I'm going to confuse people, right? And after they start to spend on projects that they want to do to make them look good, then we're going to be at a negative of $6 million. That don't make sense to me. And then the other interesting part, Mr. Speaker, is that they haven't put $1 in our rainy day account. But you want to sell to the people all the surplus we have, and then you're going to spend every cent of it. Not only are you going to spend all of it, but not enough of it is going to education, and then you're going to spend, their projections is that they're going to overspend by $6.1 million. And unless somebody wants to clarify it to me, they're going to overspend by $6.1 million, even though they've made a surplus. And even though they're overspending, they're not putting any away. So tell me, I don't understand how that works. How can you overspend? You're projected overspend by $6 million. You're going to be in negative after you finish spending? Well, Mr. Speaker, Finance Committee is coming up, and they have every opportunity to clarify what I've said or counteract it. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to move on now to another area that I thought was also interesting. Housing assistance. Again, now the transfer payments. For the persons who were assisted in an 18-month budget, 16 and 17 was 12. Now we're moving to a 1 year budget, and the estimates are going up 100%. So within less time, because the first time was 18, it was 12. Now we're going to 1 year, now it's 24. And if you disbelieve me, Mr. Speaker, look on page 290 under TP 60, housing assistance. Projections in 2018, 12, 19 is moved up from 12 to 24. And in the last budget cycle, which was 18 months, it was 12. Again, another signal that there's more people who are in need of this, so we need more money to assist them. But yet still this administration is going to talk about how good we're going to do, but yet still we're projecting that there's going to be more people that's going to need. Again, Children and Family Services support. This one just stayed exactly the same amount. One would assume that based on how successful this administration, which I noticed that nobody said anything when my colleague here said the PPM-led administration, because that's exactly what a lot of people are calling you. Because nobody has yet to define what the unity government means. I'm expecting to hear Captain Eugene. I'm expecting to hear Bernie Bush.
Honorable member, in referring to other members, you need to refer to their constituencies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize. Learning curves as I go. I'm expecting to see a member from West Bay North. I'm expecting to see the member from West Bay Central. I'm expecting to see the member from Prospect. I'm expecting to see the member from Bordentown East. All highlight what parts of this budget that they campaigned on is in it. That's the only way it could be a unity government, where everything that everybody campaigned on got a little something. Otherwise, we're going to have, Mr. Speaker, yet again, another PPM-led administration. What's the difference, Mr. Speaker? I question and I ask the people of this country to question themselves. Is unity government just a name, or is there actions? Because those members from those constituencies I just highlighted, in my view, Mr. Speaker, if they don't get their parts in there, they're going to have some trouble in 2021. If their only agenda is going to be the progressives' agenda.
Honorable member, you can't make those kind of assumptions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll move on. I heard that the Honorable Premier just said he can't wait to get up. I'm assuming then he's coming after me. But he also advised me, Mr. Speaker, in my earlier tenure in politics before I was elected to this Honorable House, that he said, Kenneth Bryan, politics is the art of war. So I'm assuming this is what he's talking about, because he's basically just said that he will deal with me when he gets up, Mr. Speaker. But that's a part of it. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I'm being a little bit distracted in respect to what my focus is, but Mr. Speaker, one of the things that also stood out to me in this, not only this budget statement, but also in the previous, excuse me, Mr. Speaker. strategic policy statement is the fear that there seems to be a bit of an attack on the conservation bill. I agree. I want to say this cautiously, Mr. Speaker. I agree there needs to be a little bit of a balance. But I want to make this government aware that there's many people who care tremendously about the environment, and they're feeling that there's an attack coming on the protection against the environment. I appreciate the environment. I want to protect my environment. My manifesto says that I will protect the environment. I ask the government to be very cautious in their wording, because many people are starting to feel that they're being abandoned on protecting the environment. And if I have to be the sole Lone Ranger in that protection, then so be it. But we can't go too far left after we were too far right before. There needs to be a balance. So I hope, not suggesting that the government will, but we all know, Mr. Speaker, the words you choose may sound a bit different than what your intentions are. So I'll highlight that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that also is concerning for me is that the government, I guess it's not concerning, Mr. Speaker, but I'm worried about how it's going to play out. I'm excited that the government has chosen to continue with the annual Christmas cleanup plan that happens every year. But, Mr. Speaker, we all have to acknowledge that it's a little bit different now than it was the last time in respect to single-member constituencies. And I remember the complaint of other districts. And the last Christmas cleanup, where you hear Georgetown got more than West Bay, or West Bay got more than Bordentown, or vice versa. I must say, Mr. Speaker, I am well aware that I am the sole person that's not a part of the administration in Georgetown and in Georgetown Central. And I'm comfortable to say that there's many people in my constituency who look forward to that Christmas cleanup, because there's a lot of them unemployed in my area. So I want to put it on public notice now that I want to make sure that there's a proper, balanced approach to make sure that each constituency, all 19 of them, have their fair share of workers, however amount of workers that the government intends to employ. Because everybody in every constituency have unemployed persons who will be looking forward to the Christmas cleanup. Because I am aware, Mr. Speaker, that sometimes it wasn't too balanced in the previous cleanups, and I'm not going to allow politics to harm my constituents in Georgetown Central. Mr. Speaker, the Premier said on page 3, today we have done these past 4 years, we are again presenting a reasonable but ambitious budget that not only meets the requirements of the Public Management and Finance Law, but also advances the government's agenda, which I set out in the strategic policy statement past August. My question, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if all members of the current government would agree about what happened in the past 4 years. He keeps on referring to the past 4 years. As if I remember correctly, Mr. Speaker, those members that are made up with his government right now, Mr. Speaker, campaigned about him and his administration. So I'm concerned if the members that is now part of his administration is now in support of what he did in the last 4 years. Because I remember quite clearly in the campaign, not a lot of people were too happy.
Honorable member, leave the campaign behind and stick to the policy statement or the budget. You are been talking much about the campaign, and I've given some leeway for it, but I don't think you should base your whole speech on it, and I don't think it's certainly not in this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I would ask you to ask the Honorable Premier to keep his comments until it's time for his rebuttal. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I'll be saying some things he don't want nobody else to hear either. Mr. Speaker, I think that the government's intention, by way of what the independent member for Prospect Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Premier has just said under his breath, and you didn't say anything about it, is that I'm going to see a side of him that other people have never seen before. And to me, Mr. Speaker, that's a threat, political threat. And that's what I'm having to deal with right now for my constituents, because this Honorable Premier doesn't want me to get any farther because of past history. I don't think that's appropriate for him to say under his breath. And I think the records of this House should show that he just said that.
Honorable member, members say things, just to explain to you, that while they are not called upon, as I said earlier yesterday, and we don't record those things, there is banter back and forth, and we give way to light movements at times. But I don't take notice of all that is said. If that was so, then the member that's talking to you right now, I would have to, most of the time, put him out.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker, with your permission.
Honorable Premier.
I just wish to clarify something. I was trying to make a light moment initially because the member has spent, I don't know how many days, begging me to let him come and join the government. So I was saying to him, if the government is so bad, I don't know why he wants to join it. That's all I was trying to say.
Mr. Speaker, is it my time?
Honorable member, you only have 2 hours. You only have 2 hours, honorable member, and I would advise you to deal with the things that you need to deal with most.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, maybe if the Honorable Premier accepted me as a part of his government, he might have a stronger government. But, Mr. Speaker, we will see in 2021 whether or not his government is strong, and I just hope and pray that the independent members that I respect so much keep strong. And I am proud of the member for Prospect to show his boldness today. I must say that.
You said that already.
I want to say it again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am concerned that the government's plan or the government's hope to get Cayman's job is missing a key element, or matter of fact, 2 key elements, Mr. Speaker. One, the enforcement arm of the labor problem that we have in this country. I did not hear enough from the strategic budget statement in respect to what this administration is going to do about that, because some of the reasons why Caymanians are not getting the opportunities is because persons who are willing to violate the immigration laws in this country are currently getting away with it, and the attitude out there is, well, immigration not going to do anything about it. And I can recall, even though I'm a youngster, Mr. Speaker, is that at a time when the likes of the Honorable Deputy Governor was a part of the Immigration Department, or the great OC was a part of the Immigration Department, none of that foolishness wasn't going on. And And it was a major part and sorry, Mr. Speaker, for keep on referring back to the campaign. I'm only doing so in respect to what people were saying that were good for the country. Because what they were saying then and what they're doing now, in my view, Mr. Speaker, is two different things. Everybody was saying throughout the campaign that more enforcement, more enforcement, more enforcement. I'm almost certain, Mr. Speaker, if I checked the videos and the debates, every single member in this government and in the opposition said more enforcement in immigration is necessary. But yet still, Mr. Speaker, I didn't see that reflected here. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this administration is going to be able to clarify that when it comes to the budget. Because I know we have a lot more officers, police officers, and I'm happy about that. And I congratulate the government for that. Because crime is a very serious problem. But the protection of Cayman opportunities for them to survive and get food in their mouth and pay for their bills and take care of their children is just as important as crime. Because that's your life in survival. So that was one of the elements. The other element that I think is missing is the understanding of the things that need to be done in order to help those who we consider as unskilled or need training or abilities to get a job in the job market. Mr. Speaker, the counselor for the premier, the member for Prospect, Mr. The member for Prospect did a very good job in clarifying the government's position on their plans and hopes to reform opportunities for Cayman employments. I commend him. There's an element that is missing that I didn't hear. And I'm hoping that he's going to be bold enough to talk to the Honorable Premier because it falls under his ministry. There is a concept that we're using and that we're selling now is that we're going to find the Caymanians who need to be upskilled and allow them to have the training opportunities to upskill themselves to put them out there in the workforce. It's all well and good. That's good. That's one part of it. But while we're training them, how are they going to eat? Where they going to live? God forbid they got children. Who going to pay for the light? Who going to pay for the water and buy groceries from? Is that reflected in this budget, Mr. Speaker? So what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is yes, I know, my information comes from the UK directly, where I have to say I'm married to a lovely English lady, and I get the privilege of going over and investigating their type of politics all the time and their social welfare system. And if you're going to go and train up yourself, what the government also does is say, while you're out there training, we're going to pay for your food, we're going to pay for your life, because you need to live. The reason why much of our training opportunities that they are saying that is available, that people are not taking advantage of, is because they can't afford to take advantage of it. Because how am I supposed to take 3 months off of living and working and I have no income? So unless we're willing to also say, listen, while you're training up yourself, here's a stipend of some sort. Because currently at this particular moment, the needs assessment unit do not pay you for going out and train. So what I'm expecting to hear is the government say, okay, currently the needs assessment unit protocol is that when you are getting a grant, you have to prove to the department that you are registered at the NWDA in order to get services if you're not working. This is what my suggestion is, Mr. Speaker, is that the government can say also if you were enrolled in these particular list of programs that the government has listed out, that you can also get assistance as well. And those programs, whichever ones that the government lists, are going to be ones that the government has identified that the particular person needs to upskill themselves. Because it's going to be hard to expect a Caymanian who is limited already in their skill set to decide to come to you, go to a training program, and they can't eat. unless they have the luxury of having a parent at home or a loved one who is willing to provide for them for that period of time of training. In any skill set in this country, it's going to take you at least 3 months. So that's another element that is missing in the employment solution for Caymanians. And Mr. Speaker, I know that the members of this House probably have heard of a potential motion that I want to bring to the House, but I'm not going to speak about the motion because the motion is not a motion until it's seconded by another member. But I'm going to, because I've heard in respect to the scope of this discussion, other persons offer up solutions. And I've even heard one by the members of the government itself, namely the member for Prospect. So I must be allowed to offer up a solution. And my solution, this would be, I guess, the third section of the employment element that is missing that the government, I don't think, has recognized, is where there's a number of reasons why Caymanians are not getting opportunities here. Because we all know it's not because there are not enough jobs. There's more jobs in Cayman than there are Caymanians. So there has to be other reasons why that unemployed number of, I don't want to be quoted on this, but I think it's about 5.5% now, going up. 4.2% and expected to rise next year. Now, of that number, there's a number of reasons why persons are unemployed. One, they just don't want to work. And every country has that section of people. Those ones, there needs to be a lot of community and parenting and support to get these people motivated to want to do something. You got the people who need to be upskilled and uptrained and retooled. That the government has outlined that there's a number of programs, even though the Honorable Premier in his statement didn't list them. He said there was loads of them, but he wouldn't list them. And I guess in Finance Committee, I'll ask the question to list every one of them because there's so many of them that I'm unaware of. But those persons can go to those training programs to get upskilled. But then you have the third problem, which is those persons who are being undermined by the labor market for malicious reasons by malicious employers. Persons who are, in most people's view, qualified or certified, who you think can do the job, but for some other reason, in most cases it's because of money, why the Cayman don't get the job. So how do you address that? And that brings me to the potential motion that I would like to bring to this House in the future. It needs a few tweaks, Mr. Speaker, and I need to be able to convince more members of the reasoning behind it to support it. But it's not a motion yet, Mr. Speaker, so I can talk about it. Let's talk about this recommendation that I plan to recommend to the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Premier. Basically, the recommendation is that the government creates a national jobs criteria list. And for persons who haven't heard of this concept yet, the theory is quite simple. Currently in the Cayman Islands, when a person gets a job, the job and its criteria or qualifications for that post is determined by the employer. The employer is the person who outlines what criteria you need to have in order to get that job. And logically speaking, you would say to yourself, well, of course the employer should have a major input. But if an employer has an agenda, a malicious employer now, because there's a lot of great employers, and by all means, any business people who are watching this or listening to this, if you're a good business person, we're not talking about you. And majority of the business owners in this country are good people. But the ones that are bad are the ones that are causing that 4.2% unemployed Caymanians, and I'm speaking about them. So going back to the concept of the malicious employer, if a malicious employer who has no intentions of hiring a Caymanian is in control of the criteria that it takes to get any post that they're hiring for, if they don't want the Caymanian, they can make up any criteria they want and then tell the immigration board or the Business Staffing Plan Board that the Caymanian didn't meet the criteria. So if they're always in control of the criteria necessary, then they ultimately will always outdo the Caymanian from getting the chance at the opportunity. So, Mr. Speaker, my suggestion was that we create a national career criteria list. And how we do this is by having stakeholders, business people from the various different industries to go through every job in this country from entry level to middle management. And I'll explain why I stop at middle management a little later on. But every job from entry level to middle management, and create a criteria based on stakeholders' opinion. And those stakeholders would be the business community, Chamber of Commerce, Small Business Association, the what we call Labor Department now, but now soon to be Human Resources Department, and Immigration. We all sit down, you create a select committee like what has been proposed before. You create a select committee, and they go through each particular post, and you list out the criteria. Because then we'd have a balanced approach to what is expected of a Caymanian. Because we know then, when we hear situations where a person says, you need an associate's degree in biochemicals in order to pump gas, and then they can justify it and say, well, you're around chemicals. And we know that you don't need to have a degree in biochemicals to pump gas. But right now, the control is in the hands of the employer. And if that control gets in the hands of a malicious employer, it's very damaging for any Cayman to get an opportunity. Because we know that there's some employers who see hiring cheap labor as an advantage to them. Because we all know, Mr. Speaker, that salaries is, if not the second, the third highest number of an expense for any business. And it's the one area that most businesses tackle when they're trying to downsize or control or increase their profitability. Get as cheapest amount of labor as you possibly can. And there's a theory out there right now, Mr. Speaker, that Cayman is addicted to cheap labor. And that's the major cause for the high unemployment in this country. I think the cost of living is also a contributor to the high unemployment. But, Mr. Speaker, my concept was simple in respect to saying that there has to be other input involved in what the criteria is going to be for any one person to get a job outside of the employer alone. Because unfortunately, there's some malicious employers who would do anything to undermine a Caymanian, hence the reason why we're getting these tailor-made posts and causing a Caymanian never to get the job. But when I bring that suggestion to the House, I'll have more clarity to it if I've kind of confused anybody, because it is a complicated matter, but one that I think that most people, once they hear the full details of it and understanding of the mechanisms of hiring in this country and the work permit system and the business staffing plan system, that they'll understand that my principles of my argument is on point. And I've just heard from the Honorable Opposition Leader that we plan to bring motions to the House that will fix it, as long as the government is smart enough to support it. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about some good things. And when I speak about this, I'm going to be bringing up the Minister for Financial Services. A very honorable woman, by the way, I must say. Virtuous. In respect to the government's agreement to increase the promotion of financial services, because it was underfunded, in my view, in the last administration. And I know that the minister in charge of this area is a fighter and would have fought in cabinet for her fair share to take care of the ministry she's in charge of. So I want to give my full support in respect to that. there was some other areas of things that I was rather surprised, and I want to give my full support, but because the Honorable Premier has me on edge, I can't even find the good ones for him. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to page 5 on paragraph 3. It says, so in the budget, we have provided an additional $9.6 million to cover special education, the enhancement of science, literacy, and math, as well as skills upgrading for 400 teachers and assistants, and for scholarships and young programs and additional teachers. Now, Mr. Speaker, I saw that based on their cash flow, they only had 7 to 1 point something million. And I sympathize, and this is the part where I'm being nice to the Premier now, even though he's out to get me, Mr. Speaker, where I sympathize with him with the surplus that he does have to try to balance on getting a lot of things done across the whole government. But I still do not think the 9.6 million is enough to justify to say that the top priority for this administration is education. Mr. Speaker, there's one thing that has been bothering me for some time that I hope that this administration could give me an answer in their response is, why did we build the moratorium first?
What?
The hall. The auditorium. Thank you, member. The gymnasium for the high school. I still can't seem to understand why we spend the money on that first. The kids don't learn in there. The examinations go on in there. Great, that's fine. They could have had the examinations at the UCCI hall. There's many halls around here they could have the examination. I really hope they can give clarity to that, because now we're struggling to tell the people of Georgetown and Georgetown Central they will not have a complete high school until the end of this term. And sometimes it's a political strategy, you know. Give them the thing that they want at the very last so we can say, boy, we gave it to you. That's a political strategy. I know about it because I was there when the talks happened, Mr. Speaker. Get the things that they don't like out of the way first, and then get the things that they want done at the end of the administration while the people of Georgetown suffer without a high school. You tell me, Mr. Speaker, can the government say why would they build the gymnasium first when the classrooms is where the children of this country learning? Mr. Speaker, these are questions that the answers should only come from this administration. I apologize because there's some other members who weren't a part of that decision that is now on the government side. And please excuse them from that line of questioning. But I do not believe, Mr. Speaker, that $9.6 million out of, let me quote, give me, Mr. Speaker, let me quote exactly the number. Let me quote, Mr. Speaker, of exactly how much money that they have, so I don't misquote myself here. But as far as I recall, it was close to $100 million, or 74 million, I think it was, that they will use for government. Beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what time do I have, sir?
Honorable member, you have just about an hour left.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a whole lot of talking. But the amount that I was quoting from was $74 million upon which the government can do their stuff, that they can say, well, this is what we did. That's the figure that they're going to use for this coming year to say, these are all the things we did in 2018. That's what will happen in 2021. In 2018, we did all of this stuff, and that's not 74 million. And out of that 74 million, Mr. Speaker, 9.6 of that 74 million is going to education. When this administration is going to claim that education is their top priority, I don't know who they're talking to, but they're not talking to the people of the Cayman Islands. Because if it was their top priority, that figure would be a whole lot higher. But I'll give them this, Mr. Speaker. They have hired a very smart, intelligent man to be the head of the Educational Council, Mr. Dan Scott. And I tell you what, if this administration follows his lead and his recommendations, they'll have my full support in education. But I can bet you one thing, that when practical solutions is presented, it may not be accepted. But let me stay in the line of my scope of the debate, Mr. Speaker, because I see a little head now and then that keeps me in line. And for the public that's watching, Mr. Bush is giving me good guidance as I go along. The Honorable Speaker, I apologize. Mr. Speaker, I see that some members are trying to get me named, but there's an ongoing bet of who's going to be named first. And I think the odds are in favor of Mr. McLean from the honorable member from East. Mr. Speaker, I would like to also give congratulations to the administration. Now, as you can see, Mr. Speaker, I'm giving some credit and some criticism at the same time. I want to give this administration credit for highlighting the fact that they want to maintain seniors for employment in security areas for the administration building. I think it's something that the past administration could stay and get good credit for, because they were talking about it from then, and it's transferred now into this administration. So I think that the progressives can strongly accept that one as their own. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to commend the administration on their commitment to policing. I think it's long overdue. And I would like to say that I think that much of the coastal protection concept that has been adopted by this administration came from myself. Mr. Speaker, I was the first candidate in the last campaign that spoke about a radar system. And soon after, not only 2 weeks, that I hear the progressives also saying it as well. So I think that the progressives may have snuck that one away from me. But as ultimately, the most important thing is that the people of the country get the benefit of it. Doesn't matter where the credit goes to. So I'm glad to see they're taking on that principle, because it is a very high-cost deliverable that is necessary. And I see that they're giving the commitment to the police department, and they plan to transform our attitude of policing to a concept of its own Coast Guard. I find that there might be some difficulties in that, because it's currently managed under the governor, and how that's going to work. But I give them my full support, and if there's anything that I can do in respect to assistance, I am here. Though I slightly doubt that they will be reaching over to ask for my help. But Mr. Speaker, Sorry, sir. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to give credit to the Minister of Home Affairs and Financial Services in respect to her travels and her selling of the financial services. I know I mentioned this before, but I was so pleased. I don't like to bring up my wife in anything on the floor of the house, but my wife and I were driving to drop the kids off to school one day, and we heard the Honorable Minister for Financial Services speaking on the radio. I think it was just after coming away from the EU in Brussels. And my wife being in financial services, having to go through the current SEMA audits of all the companies for the information between all the companies. And it's a bit of a hassle for most of the businesses because they got to get themselves compliant and everybody's running around, and it's quite of an annoying thing for all the companies, but they have to get it done. But what led me to understand that the minister was doing so well, she said, that's the first time that I've heard an elected member succinctly said it sweet and short about what needs to be done in the promotion of the Cayman Islands financial services, that we're not a tax haven, and she said that she spoke the language of finance and she spoke the language of a common man all in one term. And she said, why wouldn't she the finance minister before for financial services? She got what I meant, Mr. Speaker. So I just want to give her credit in respect to that because there is much talk about her good work in respect to that department. Well, I hope, Mr. Speaker, that she doesn't get in any trouble from the leader of the government for that. But I think it's important because we heard from the financial services industry leaders that we need to start selling our product in the international market better. And I think she's doing a good job in respect to selling it the appropriate way and giving truth to it. And obviously she's going to need money to go out and sell it because like any other marketing in the world, it's going to be costly. And we market everything else, like our tourism, we spend millions of dollars for it. Financial services being our number one industry. I'm glad to see that she fought for the budget for it. But I'm going to move on from her because they're going to think that I'm in love with her in a second. Let's talk about cost of living, Mr. Speaker. This is another area that I don't think that the government spent much time talking about. The current attitude of the administration is we're going to get the economy strong and booming, and then Caymanians are going to have jobs, and Caymanians will be able to live. There's some people who have jobs now, Mr. Speaker, and still can't live because they're not addressing the cost of living. And Honorable Premier was not in the room when I spoke about his nuclear option in respect to price control, so maybe it's time for me to reiterate it, Mr. Speaker. All right. I'm glad to hear that you heard, sir. Now, I think that we have to take a serious look on some ways to reduce the cost of living. The current plan, and admitted by the leader of this current administration, is we just don't want to increase it. But there's people out there who cannot live on the current level it's at now. So just maintaining it where it is not good enough, because this administration cannot tell the business community to increase the salaries of their workers. Now, you can maybe influence the increase in salaries of the civil servants, which you need to do that too. You need to pay them more. They work hard. I give Mr. Honorable Deputy Governor credit. I went to a presentation by him the other day, and he's doing a good job. Miss Gloria Nixon McField is doing an amazing job. Keep up the good work. Civil servants, keep on fighting hard. You're doing good no matter what they say. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have to seriously take a look at reducing the cost of living. If the government doesn't have a solution for that, that being one of the top 5 issues in this country, then they're not going to succeed in this 4 years. And I want to go down in record today because I promised this administration, with the Lord's help, if he brings me to 2021 and the cost of living is not down, I'm going to take the same recording and I'm going to play it again in 2021, Mr. Speaker. So if the government needs the help of the opposition members to find a solution to bring down the cost of living, we'd be happy to help. But they haven't come up with one because they haven't presented one, Mr. Speaker. You see, if you had accepted me on your side of your government, you might have had a solution by now. Well, you can tell them when you get up, Mr. Premier. I want to remind you, Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the Honorable Premier of your statements earlier when you opened this Honorable House in respect to interruptions, sir. Because I'm being currently interrupted by the Honorable Premier in respect to my focus on my debate. Mr. Speaker, I found it, unfortunately, rather hypocritical of the government to give you credit for establishing a local honor system that you started a while back. They're giving you credit for it now. But, Mr. Speaker, when you were in charge and you tried to do this, they said so many things about it was vote buying this and vote buying that. Anyway, I guess it's pointless to say a good idea is a good idea regardless of when it comes. But too bad you couldn't get the credit for it, and I want to give you the credit now that this was your idea. Mr. Speaker, I want to, sadly, I don't want this to be a time of pure fighting with the administration. I've reached out numerous times with this administration to be reasonable. I know colleagues over here has tried to do so, but sadly, Mr. Speaker, politics is being played all the time. And the nature of the beast that you see now, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, is because of the actions of another. Mr. Speaker, I will not allow this administration to just allow me to phase out into the whispers and just be quiet for 4 years to say, oh, Mr. Bryan didn't do anything. They're not willing to work with me, then they're going to have to deal with me. Either one. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the influence of the independent members, because I must say I'm really impressed with Austin and the elected member for Prospect. I apologize, Mr. Speaker. In respect to his ability to determine his support for his administration, but separate that he don't agree with a particular part. It shows maturity. It shows the characteristics of a true independent. I hope that he doesn't have to suffer as a result of that bold move. But that's exactly what a government is supposed to be able to do, work together, but still be able to disagree. I haven't seen much of that. The last person who tried that didn't make it through. But But I say, Mr. Speaker, that I give him all the credit that he deserves. I just hope that empathy alone is not what this government is planning to do. Because as I started out my speech, Mr. Speaker, I said empathy is only understanding what people go through. I think all of us in here all understand what most people in this country are going through. Whether we're willing to do something about it is a different story. Because I know each and every one of us in here, Mr. Speaker, has people who come and call them every day. Sometimes it just gets overwhelming. You don't even answer your phone. You know. Sometimes other things get in the way from you doing the right thing. So, Mr. Speaker, I know one thing. When they don't call him back, I will. And, Mr. Speaker, I hope that this administration will do everything in its power to really help the average Caymanian with the difficulty they're facing. And most of the difficulties that they're facing has to do with money. Money is the key element that is running this country right now. The lack of it or the greed of it. And it's causing our communities to divide. It's causing crime. It's causing even for us to lose our Christian heritage, the love of money. And I want to share one experience with you, Mr. Speaker, before I wrap up. Because I know, Mr. Speaker, that, Mr. Speaker, a successful businessman that not is from a successful business person who is not from the Cayman Islands but is now a Caymanian. So he's a Caymanian, but he's became a Caymanian over the last 20 years. Successful person, millions of dollars. And me and him got into this conversation about Caymanians and some that don't want to work and some who are not schooled and trained well enough and all that. And he said he expressed how frustrated he is because he truly, when he started his business, he wanted to really commit to the Cayman Islands. He fell in love like most people usually do, come and say, oh, what a lovely community, very loving people and willing to talk to everybody. So they truly buy in. But after a while, they get frustrated by giving a chance, one or two chances, and then they kind of give up. And they go, oh, and then they fall into this other attitude of just go ahead and play the system and you hire anybody else from somewhere else because the lack of enforcement around here, they can get away with it. And I had to express to him, I said, how much money have you spent in the Cayman Islands? He said, Kenneth, to be honest here, just over $9 million, but I plan to spend some more. I said, boy, that's a lot of money. I say, you plan to pass it on to your children? He says, well, that's who I'm working for. I said, good. I said, I want you to think about this for a second. I don't want to call his name, so I'm just going to say him. I said, if you don't do your social commitment and your part to make sure that those who are not getting at least have an opportunity to get by way of an employment, your children are going to have nothing to get. Because our society are going to change to a world that businesses are not going to be attracted to come here. Because when we're overloaded with crime, all that money he spent will disappear and be no more use to him. Just for example, nobody's going to want to come to Cayman Bay if the murder rate in the Cayman Islands has skyrocketed, or the burglaries or the robberies have gone out of the loop. The reason why crime increased so much in the last 40 years, because every single year we get more loose and more loose and more loose of protecting Caymanians and their opportunities in business, in survival, and in employment. If you do not protect it, the natural course of life and survival takes place. I asked a father, any father out there, what would you do if after trying and trying and trying and trying and trying again to do the right thing, and you have your children who are hungry, and you've tried the right thing over and over again, what would you do when they start crying and say that they're hungry? When you think about that, then you'll understand what our lack in focus on our social commitment is going to do to this country in the long term. And again, as I started, and what I said, that this statement says empathy. People don't want empathy no more. Empathy means I understand what you're going through. I don't want you to understand. I want you to do something about it. Mr. Speaker, the most difficult thing for me as an independent member is when people come to me and say, Kenneth, you're elected now. Why help me with a job? And still don't have the power that these gentlemen do in respect to making the right decisions to make sure that the employment market is more conducive for Caymanians to get a chance. They're the ones that have to increase the enforcement. They're the ones that have to stop all these work permits. Not us, Mr. Speaker. We can stand up here day in, day out and criticize. They control the policies and decisions in this country. Even if we bring a motion to change it, they can still deny it. Or like the opposition leader said, accept it for political purposes, make it look good, and then shelve it. Because that has happened before. That has happened before. So when it gets to that stage where, boy, you can't deny this one, because too many people looking, accept it, and then you shove it up in the corner, and then it never comes into effect. Mr. Speaker, I beg on your conscience for this administration, remember what you were going through the campaign, because the campaign time is that one time that we really connect with the people, and we go into the neighborhoods, we hear the cries, we really sit down and actually listen to it. And through that time, our emotions are running. And once the election is done, we start to slowly fade off of that campaign feel. And then we get into the political mode of, boy, I need to get something done. And I got to sacrifice this and I got to sacrifice that. If you go back to that feeling, and by all means, Mr. Speaker, I'm not trying to identify any particular person, but remember the responsibility that you have when you're on that side, because you're in control of the decisions that change the lives of the Caymanian people. I'm asking you to remember it. Please remember it. Because every 4 years, it's the same thing. I do not want to come to 2021 and the people said, well, it's the same old thing. Can we not be bold enough this time around to say, let's take this thing by the horns and truly change it? I really thought there was going to be a major shakeup. Members of this House may remember when I opened to the Honorable Premier's statement, people thought I'd want to try to jump on the government because I was saying so many good things. I was really hoping by his statement and his attitude to say, I want to leave it all on the table. I really felt that was happening, but that feeling is starting to deteriorate because politics is starting to play again. Mr. Speaker, please, I'm asking this administration, do not make 2021 come and we haven't done anything other than the same old. Nothing I've seen in this statement that jumps out at me to say, wow. Nothing, Mr. Speaker. It's a lot of the same old. And in 2021, the people are going to be crying about the same thing, but there's going to be more of them. 2021, I might be here, but Cayman is still going to be here. Mr. Speaker, may God bless this country and the people, and particularly those in Georgetown Central. We got a job to do. Remember God watching. Thank you so much.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The member from Georgetown South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is my honor and privilege to stand here tonight and contribute to the debate on the Governor's throne speech, the Premier's budget policy statement, and the Minister for Finance and Economic Development 2018-2019 budgets as the elected member for Georgetown South and as councillor for the ministry responsible for education, youth, sports, agriculture, and lands. Although I stand here as the representative for Georgetown South, which represents a very wide cross-section of our Caymanian population, giving voice to their aspirations and needs, I also stand here to look out for the interest of the Cayman Islands and all those who call these islands home. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased that our government will begin talks with Her Majesty the Governor Helen Kilpatrick, CB, and Her Majesty's government on the establishment of a police authority to help create new approaches in fostering accountability and enhancing the responsiveness to the people's concerns about crime. I'm also happy that the Governor and the UK are willing to discuss the issue. This, if and when it comes to pass, will be an important innovation in law enforcement. For too long, legislators have faced the concern that the people who elect them expect elected members to have a say regarding policing, but in practice, this is not the case. I would also venture to say that as good governance falls to the Governor and the UK, they must accept that good governance cannot be had without considering the input from the representatives of the people. We are in the 21st century, Mr. Speaker, and we must have a 21st century relationship with the UK that allows some devolved authority over internal security that can provide better outcomes for our people. Mr. Speaker, I am also pleased to see that the United Kingdom will be assisting us with our border control in the future. This has also been an issue for a long time. This new approach to safety will definitely be another avenue for employment, particularly for our young people. The Cayman Islands have a long history of maritime involvement. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, our coat of arms says, "He hath founded it upon the seas." Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate the Minister for Finance and Economic Development, the Honorable Roy McTaggart, on his first budget for this government of national unity. The first ever two-year budget for these islands, and his first budget as Minister for Finance and Economic Development. I would also like to congratulate him for presenting it in terms that the ordinary person can understand and for its brevity. I am particularly pleased that the Honorable Minister has stated that he intends to continue to support and ensure that there are substantial operating surpluses each year. No new fees or taxes levied on the public, and no new borrowings apart from refinancing an element of the 2019 bond. Mr. Speaker, by abiding by these guiding principles, we are working to secure our long-term financial position and maintain compliance with the Framework for Fiscal Responsibility, or FFR, as set out in the Public Management and Finance Law. Mr. Speaker, it is often said that the only real independence is financial independence. So we must ensure that we do not only have a balanced budget with surpluses that allow us to maintain healthy cash reserves, but that we comply with all the required ratios and tests that satisfy all the principles of responsible financial management required by law. Without this, we not only risk our financial independence, but we will also lose our ability to control our budget without oversight from the UK. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is also speaking my language when he says that a strong emphasis will be placed on what is being delivered rather than just what we plan to do. We must ensure that we deliver on our promises to the people. They will hold us accountable on the promises we made to them. The Premier, in his strategic policy statement, noted his intention to ensure that we create and sustain a consistent and constant culture of delivery. I will be alongside him every step of the way to ensure that we do deliver on our promises. 4 years may seem long, but it will pass quickly. So action is what is needed. The Cayman Islands, Mr. Speaker, is a service-based economy, a large part of which is knowledge-based. Implicit in this is the fact that we must have well-educated and highly skilled people. We must not have a country that is the 5th largest financial center in the world, or is one of the major tourism centers in the region, renowned for quality tourism, and not have in place the necessary education and training to provide opportunities for our people to participate in this success story. I join with the Premier in saying to parents and young people that we need to once again embrace the trades as being good jobs for Caymanians, and indeed good Caymanian jobs. Many of our fathers and mothers worked in all areas of hospitality, or as masons or mechanics, or even, yes, as nurses and teachers. These were jobs that, along with seafaring, helped build our islands in years gone by. So as a government, we will provide educational opportunities for young people that will allow them to move into careers of their choice, whether as a banker, accountant, lawyer, or equally important, as an air conditioning mechanic, chef, or working as a lab technician. The jobs that are available in Cayman today are many and varied. We just need to expand the horizons of our young people and provide right educational environment to help them blossom. Mr. Speaker, turning to the Premier's budget policy statement, suitably entitled Stability, Empathy, Prosperity, a plan for sustainable social and economic development. Every concern that the Premier has mentioned also concerns me as a member of this honorable House, although a very new one. I was happy to hear the Premier's plan to tackle the significant issues facing this country. I will work hard to assist wherever I can in addressing and solving these issues. However, Mr. Speaker, in my budget address, I will speak to particular matters which I am committed to improving and enhancing. Mr. Speaker, the last Progressives-led government has indeed given the current administration an excellent platform, both in terms of strong, sustainable economic growth and the return to fiscal stability. We will indeed use that platform to tackle the significant issues facing this country. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, this is a new government of national unity, voted in by the electorate to represent their concerns. I want to be a part of the solution to the concerns expressed by the people of Georgetown South and indeed the whole Cayman Islands. I was pleased to see that in both the Premier's budget policy statement and in the Minister of Finance's address, there was a heavy emphasis on dealing with the social issues of our country. Point in fact, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to see that our civil servants who spent many years in the civil service, who are now retired with minimal pension, will now receive financial assistance to bring them on par with the veterans, seafarers, and those Caymanians in need who receive financial assistance. With many of these folks being elderly, in many cases, the money they receive monthly makes a big difference in their quality of life. Mr. Speaker, this is one way of helping reduce poverty in accordance with the United Nations Millennial Goals. But, Mr. Speaker, there is one issue that needs to be addressed, and that has been brought to my attention. And I know that others in this honorable House have heard the same complaint. The issue is that too many of these individuals do not always benefit from these payments. Why is that, Mr. Speaker? It is because there is abuse in the system, and this needs to be corrected. Abuse that allows family members or others to access the funds paid to the intended beneficiaries, leaving these needy persons with little, if anything, of the amount paid by government. A system needs to be established to properly monitor the use of these funds to ensure that these ex gratia payments fully benefit the intended beneficiary. Now that we have a council for older persons, it is hoped that this is one issue that they will look at to see how best this problem can be fixed. Indeed, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that the newly appointed council sees this as part of their remit. In the making of these ex gratia payments, we must ensure that the helpmate or spouse of our seamen is not ignored, forgotten, and left in dire poverty. Our Constitution recognized the contribution of these women when it stated in the preamble at page 13 that the people of the Cayman Islands affirmed their intention to be, and I quote, a country that honors and acknowledges the important contribution of Caymanian women who, during the absence of the seafaring men of the islands, managed the affairs of their homes, businesses, and communities, and passed on the values and traditions of the island's people, close quote. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has said that this is a government with ambition. Like him, I too have those same ambitions for my country and my people. This is why I am happy to see that this budget is investing in and giving priority in improving the range of services provided to our people. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has also said that this administration would prioritize education, and I totally support him on this. He has emphasized that this budget directs resources to raise our game on all aspects of education, technical and vocational education training, and continuing to drive up academic standards in our schools. Education and youth are areas that have always held my interest, and they are very close to my heart. Many aspects of my campaign were focused on positively affecting the youth of our country and my interest in strengthening our education system. And I am truly pleased that these are my area of focus for the next 3.5 years. Our young people are without doubt the future of these islands, and I am looking forward to being a part of furthering their education, growth, and development. Education is the catalyst for growth in any society, and I take the responsibility to empower our current students to leave our education system on a path to becoming successful future leaders and contributors to our society very seriously. It is this passion for young people and education that made me request to work in that ministry. And I want to publicly state my appreciation to the Honorable Premier and the Honorable Minister for Education for this opportunity. It has been challenging, but really satisfying and rewarding. Since my appointment as Counselor for Education, a short 5 months ago, I've had the privilege of assisting the Minister by attending and participating in various school leaving ceremonies and graduations, visiting the Sunrise Adult Training Center, attending the Feed Our Future fundraiser, reading to the children of Georgetown Primary, East End, and Savannah Primary Schools, attending and speaking at the Rubis Top Student Awards ceremony, among other visits and events. Attending these events has allowed me to hit the ground running in terms of being fully informed in what is happening in the education in our islands and to obtain some direct insights into the strengths of our system, the talents of our students, and some of the gaps we face on a daily basis. On some of those visits to the schools, I have received insight into the day-to-day operations and accumulated first-hand knowledge of some of the needs of our system. There are a number of programs that were previously implemented that works towards meeting these needs, and I'm happy to support their continued implementation. Mathematics recovery, which is an approach to intervention for students who are struggling in mathematics, which focuses on improving the maths performance of students at the primary level. The rollout of the reading recovery intervention, which focuses on improving literacy performance for Year 3 students who are struggling, and the training of interventionists. Focus on a science strategy, which will enable targeted science education and empower future careers in technical and vocational areas. Tier 3 interventions, which include individual support for our students with special learning needs to ensure that they do not fall behind on their progress. The response to intervention for Year 1 and Year 2 students, which helps to close reading achievements gaps at some of our earliest stages. The Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, or PBIS program, which aims to create positive school climates through a student-driven culture of positive ideals. Each school was responsible for determining their individual ideals, which govern their behaviors on a day-to-day basis. This aims to resolve behavioral issues from the inside out instead of through a punishment-based framework. Professional development for teachers, helping to ensure that our educators receive training that is both useful and consistent with international standards. Increased focus on technical and vocational education through increased offerings of courses at the Cayman Islands Further Education Center, or CIFEC. These initiatives are based on our own specific needs and are supported by international best practice and need to be given the resources and opportunity to fully flourish for the benefit of those in our system. While there are always areas for improvement, I will not advocate change for change's sake, as my concern is and always will be about what is in the best interest of our children and our country. To this end, there are areas that I am personally interested in, which I will focus my energy on. The foundation upon which students begin their early journey is of utmost importance. I am therefore seeking to support the Early Childhood Care and Education unit in its remit of serving our youngest learners. For the first time in our history, early childhood education has become a part of the education law, and the ECCE unit therefore will have legislative teeth to regulate and develop ECCE centers. I will support their continued work with offering various training to ECCE centers to develop their expertise, such as support in implementing inclusive practices and other ways to support any children with special learning needs and any other skills necessary to build a strong foundation for all children to commence the compulsory education level. This unit's budget also allows for a secondment post. The focus of such secondment will be on working with parents. Parents are their children's first teachers, and this secondment will work to establish a parent strategy for both the centers and the ministry. Its aim is improving the relationship with parents, improving parent involvement, supporting PTAs, which can help to improve parent involvement, and also help to maintain the connection with parents for the long term. I will ensure that this post is filled to allow this goal to be achieved. This leads me to my second focus, which is parental involvement at all levels. A strong foundation is not just limited to a strong educational foundation in the setting of an educational institution. It also extends to the home. We know that many students encounter numerous barriers to learning that originate in the home. These are usually the result of the lack of parental involvement and the lack of parental supervision. Students first learn from their parents and continue to do so at all ages. It is therefore my goal to focus on ways to improve communication between schools and parents and guardians, and to stimulate an interest in education by uninvolved parents. My third area of focus is something I hope we can tie into every school's positive behavior intervention and support, or PBIS culture, taking pride in yourself. We often get caught in a dialogue as regards to students disobeying dress codes or wearing their uniforms incorrectly. I believe that this is a larger issue than just dress codes. Our students have not all been taught the correlation between self-respect, taking pride in oneself, and the way you are perceived by others. I believe, therefore, that until we start changing their behavior in this regard and changing the culture around it, we will continue to beat this proverbial dead horse. It is therefore my goal to implement an additional PBIS ideal that is consistent across all government schools, which is specific to respecting oneself, one school, and the clothing which identifies which school they attend at all times. My fourth area of focus is one that is personal to me, which is that healthy bodies promote healthy minds. A policy for standards for food provision was rolled out to all schools to ensure that healthy, wholesome foods are served to students daily. Mr. Speaker, I had the privilege of being invited to eat lunch at the John Gray High School cafeteria a few months ago and was impressed by the healthy menu offered to the students. There was a salad bar that could compete with any of the local supermarkets, and one that I would choose to eat at any day. I was also amazed by all the students that were waiting to be served salad. So you see, Mr. Speaker, we are on our way to healthy bodies and healthy minds, but it's going to take time. We just have to keep educating our students from an early age, starting from home. All students do not, however, take advantage of these food options, and I believe that this is an extension of my previous point about students taking pride in themselves. Many students know what foods they like, but are not fully aware of the impact that eating a healthy, balanced diet every day has on their physical bodies. Neither are they aware that it will help them keep in shape and also keep up their respective sports. In addition, this will improve their cognitive abilities, leading to improvements in grades and other classroom outcomes. Inspiring a self-driven goal to treat their bodies well is a goal I hope to achieve during my time in this role. My fifth area of focus that I am passionate about focusing on is promoting technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, and science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, related education and pathways to employment. Firstly, I am pleased with the offerings and increasing offerings in TVET courses available at the Cayman Islands Further Education Center, and hope that we can continue to add even more relevant Level 3 courses to the repertoire at SciFec. The uptake on the courses currently offered is significant, and there are even more areas that our students could be given access to at this level. Additionally, I would like to commend the partnership between SciFec and the Public Works Department to offer the apprenticeship program so that teenagers can spend 8 months working alongside master technicians in plumbing, electrical installation, air conditioning, painting and carpentry, so as to learn practical skills in these areas while working towards accumulating industry-recognized qualifications. Expertise in these areas is always in high demand, and these young people are surely investing in their future by obtaining this knowledge. It is my intention to inspire and motivate other partnerships, whether via other public or private entities, to offer other similar apprenticeship and/or training opportunities. I recently had the pleasure of attending the pinning ceremony for the students in the nursing program at UCCI, and it is with great pride to announce that the first cohort of this program will graduate from UCCI this evening. I'm very pleased that the previous administration, through UCCI, added this much-needed area of study to UCCI's offerings, and I will continue to support this program and others at UCCI. These qualifications will never be rendered obsolete. In good times and in bad, there will always be a need for health care and thus for nursing. The partnership between the government, UCCI, and representatives from the hospitality industry to also offer the School of Hospitality Studies is one that is of special benefit to our large tourism-driven economy. We often hear that visitors come to our islands and rarely interact with our local people, and this program is helping to put Caymanians back in the hospitality industry, which is certainly booming and brimming with employment opportunities. I commend this partnership and plan to get more involved with the hope of helping to advance more tourism-based practical training and internship opportunities for our young people. But, Mr. Speaker, once we are educating and training our young Caymanians to a high standard, it will be incumbent on businesses to provide them with opportunities for employment. And so I will support this government's initiatives to improve the efficiency of and also the transparency of the work permit system. We need guest workers to assist us in growing and keeping our economy strong, but we also need to ensure that our own local people who are capable, willing, and able to perform a job have the first opportunity for that job. I have had times in my life, Mr. Speaker, when I have been unemployed. So I understand well how it feels to make calls and respond to advertisements over and over again. And I know well how relieved I was when I was again employed. So when I say that I intend to work hard to ensure that our young people who work hard get qualified and who display the right attitudes and work ethics have real opportunities for jobs in our country. Speaking of our young people, Mr. Speaker, I would like to add a few words on the subject area of youth in the Cayman Islands. I have been passionate about youth affairs because, like most of us do, I believe that they truly are our future. I have noted, as many of us have, the social issues and challenges that can cause a number of our young Caymanians to lose their way and fail in their quest to play an active part in our national development. Mr. Speaker, as the councillor responsible for youth, one of the first areas that I will be focusing on is the National Youth Policy, which is the guiding document that the ministry will use to support and enhance youth development in the Cayman Islands. While an implementation plan for this policy was drafted some years ago under a previous administration, it was never operationalized. The ministry will therefore be focusing on a review of the National Youth Policy, the implementation plan, and the various measures and indicators so that the development and delivery of programs by youth associations continues to be relevant and in line with the strategic direction of the ministry. Mr. Speaker, the ministry working through the Youth Services Unit will continue to empower our young people and the work of strengthening those organizations and entities that provide services for the youth of these islands. In order to further support the work of the Youth Services Unit, the ministry will seek to develop supporting legislation that includes the requirement for organizations to provide youth-related data, which will allow the ministry to make data-driven decisions on youth-related matters. Mr. Speaker, while our youth have had a number of successes, including the great achievement by our young chefs at Carafesta, we believe that the stronger the youth service providers, the better they will function. The ministry will, through the Youth Services Unit, seek to improve accountability of those youth service providers that receive funding from the ministry and assist providers with capacity building by conducting leadership workshops. The Youth Services Unit will continue to provide safe and supervised environments where youth can gather and work out their own worldview, such as the weekly Financial Awareness Now, or FAN Club, and the annual summer camps, the Cayman Islands Youth Assembly, or CIYA, and the weekly radio show Youth Flex. Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands Cadet Corps will continue to be utilized as a youth development tool. The Cadet Corps, which moved into their new headquarters in April this year, is investigating the possibility of assessing suitable Crown land, perhaps in the east, to construct an assault course training area. This will help in providing suitable opportunities for youth development in an appropriate environment. Mr. Speaker, the ministry will also be seeking to review and update the Cadet Corps Law 2016 revision and develop supporting regulations so as to ensure alignment with relevant existing laws and the strategic direction of the ministry. There has been some challenges in recruitment and retention of cadets in recent times. As part of a strategy to increase recruitment and retention, the Cadet Corps will be working to revive its presence in Cayman Brac and to establish new school-based detachments here in Grand Cayman. The Cadet Corps will also be seeking to develop working relationships and linkages with other uniform branches of government as part of this strategy. Mr. Speaker, through the work of the Youth Services Unit and the Cadet Corps, the ministry will continue to support and enhance youth development and reduce crime and the fear of crime within the Cayman Islands. The Premier has previously stated that this government is committed to a target of at least 75% of high school graduates moving on to post-secondary education or training by the end of this administration. The ministry, with the support of Cabinet, has put in place a national training council comprised of relevant industry bodies and stakeholders to focus on the development of a national technical and vocational education and training, or TVET, system. Two of the areas that the National Training Council is currently focusing on are the completion of a TVET policy review that includes research related to the progression pathways from high school through further education, and a review of the career counseling provision in relation to TVET.
Honorable Member for Georgetown South, how much longer do you think you have quite a bit. You want to complete tomorrow morning? You're at a point that you can break there? Thank you. Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment of this honorable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, 3rd of November.
The question is that this honorable House do now adjourn until 10 a.m. Friday, the 3rd of November, 2017. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against? No. The ayes have it. The honorable House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Friday, the 3rd of November.